Thank you all.
Okay, now we are.
Yes, so it's 5:30 and I'd like to present His Royal Highness Freï von Fräähsen to Lorenzburg, who will present a royal invitation to Lorenzburg. To return to Lorenzburg.
Put my swollen feet in my nice golden yellow slippers. Right. So, first, I have two collaborators, Frew and Betsy Lamborn, who sadly couldn't be here today, so I have maniacally tried to rearrange our presentation so that it falls upon me to do the whole thing. I hope you will be very supportive in this, and to aid you being supportive to me, I would like to hand these out. Yes. Catch if you will. I'm just going to throw them. Please don't get them in your head. Don't sue me afterwards if you get hit by little paper trumpets. And Per would kindly distribute the rest. Thank
And there seems to be some kind of problem because it's kind of cut off. I wonder how can one deal with this? I can't. No, it's kind of cut off, so pardon.
Someone's changed the format.
But it's until you want them to
Sorry, my bad. Order. So I will give to you today a presentation of a collaboration between Frew, Betsy Lamborn and myself, Freï von Fräähsen, so Lorenzburg. Lorenzburg is a tiny micronation in the city of Karlstad in Sweden. I am the prince. I won't give you the whole backstory to that project. I will just mention that Frew, Betsy Lamborn and myself met in Saxnäs in last winter session NSU, and we started a collaboration then. And this whole presentation will be fragmented, confusing, but hold on, just wait for it. Explanations will come in one way or another. So, starting with a royal invitation to return to Lorenzburg. Please take a couple of seconds just to take in the beautiful work of my colleague Frew, who embroidered this little comment to the Bayeux tapestry from the 11th century or something. And from there, Large parts of these presentations will be around this woman, my ancestor, Agnes Pia Christina Douglas, born in 1441 in Scotland, also known as the Golden Pea of Lorenzburg. Now, Betsy Lamborn has made a lovely video where she explains how she has been working with epic poems to retell a story which is kind of the intersection between an actual historical event and the kind of made-up mythological event of Lorenzburg. Please give a mighty clap and a toot for Betsy Lamborn. Too soon. Can we get a bit more?
Hello everyone. I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you today. My name is Beatrice Lamborn Mannering, and I'm an historian. At the invitation of His Serene Highness, Prince Freï of Lorenzburg, I've been conducting research into the history of Lorenzburg, in particular focusing on the connections between the House of Lorenzburg and the family Frew, who are represented by Banfisa Anna Frew. As you will all know, Agnes Christina Pia de Douglas Lorenzburg, also known as the Black Dinner Baby, or the Golden Pea, was born in Britain in 1441, the product of a frenetic and sadly short-lived union of Elizabeth, a noblewoman, a member of the Douglas family, and Sir Freï, eldest son of Count Olaus Peterson Peacock, who was the Lord of Lorenzburg at this time. Elizabeth and Freï met at the ill-fated Black Dinner. And history recalls the Black Dinner as the culmination of a meeting of great minds. Delegates from all Europe had been invited to join in political union, acting together and offering protection and a home to all kinsfolk. After 6 long days of careful negotiations and speeches, all those present had gathered together for a night of feasting and frivolity. And it was there that the lovely Elizabeth and the stoic Freï met, their eyes meeting across a suckling pig. Soon the couple had sneaked off together. Of course, it was that night, and there was this massive massacre of all those present. Elizabeth escaped and made her new home on the Isle of Wight, which is where Agnes Christina was eventually born. Until now, little had been known of Agnes Christina's life between her conception and when she arrived on a donkey in the courtyard of Purleycorn Castle, carrying her father's heart on a beautiful chain. In fact, it's this image that's thought to have been the original inspiration for the Christmas song Little Donkey. Little donkey on the Darnick road, got to keep on plodding onwards with your precious load. Been a long time, little donkey, through the winter's night. Don't give up now, little donkey, Lorenzburg been dead. And so, my research has uncovered a number of previously unknown stories about the life of the Golden Pea, which will be gathered together into a book. The text which I will now read was part of a bundle of papers found hidden in a wall space of a Yorkshire girls' school during the renovations in the 1980s. So here we have the early burly of Whale, or in modern translation, the Battle of Whale. Whale was a small castle in the northwest of England near Bolton, and things that will come up during the poem. The Scathic were a legendary Irish warrior race, and the Seath is a kind of battle dagger. The men of Riga were a gang of mercenaries and bandits based around northwest Scotland who roamed and looted as they saw fit. And so, the Battle of Whale. In the year of 1473, Agnes Christina had lived some 6 years in Whale. She worked as a blacksmith and trained with a sword, and was strong and powerful, though she lived alone. Whale was small, scarce 500 souls lived there, and their king was Oswain the Longeminous. Aged and grey, he had ruled peacefully for some 50 years, though once a fearsome warrior, he was now tired. One fulsome morning, a large army was seen on the horizon, and a horde of mercenaries and soldiers were there. Waving spears and with great cries of glee, these men of Riga descended on the kingdom. Whale was shocked, but not frozen, and families rushed to get inside the city walls. Guards ran to the towers and swords were raised, and the drawbridge was swiftly pulled up. Though Wales was small, the people fought bravely. They were unprepared, and this war raged on for many, many days, and the rivers ran red with the blood of good souls. Exhausted, Wales became desperate. And to save her home, Anna Christina jumped then from the castle walls. Alone she slashed down full 30 enemies, and the men of Riga were first shocked, and they reacted slow. But then these tyrants, they placed around her neck a noose. And Anna Christina, she struggled and she tried to be free, and the rope drew tighter and tighter. Though she gasped for air, her sword never stopped, until finally, exhausted, she fell. And it was then a mighty roar was heard, the thunder crashed and the rain began to pour. All men looked up to see the grateful, wrathful skiff. And the skiff came down from the heavens, her skiff in hand. And the skiff, her eyes burning with rage, stamped thrice upon the ground and swung her sword. And then these men, they turned to run, but she cut them down, all but one, to whom she turned and said, You are to go, but you are not free. For now you will tell the tale of Wales, and you will tell that this place is protected, and you will never stop. For it seemed like the Scud was so impressed, so astonished with Agnes's bravery that she had pledged her protection. And further, the Scud took the silent body of Agnes Christina, laying her gently in her bed in her own home. The Scud began to chant in some strange language, and around the room she walked, waving sage and burning thyme. Finally, she lit a single candle and placed it by the bedhead. And it was there the stout-hearted Agnes Christina lay for 3 days. On the 4th day, when the sun rose, it shone full in Agnes's face, and as if from death she rose. And the Scud, who had been there and kept vigil all these days, nodded and said, So you are returned to the world, great warrior, and glad we are of it. I am Wales' protector now, and for your valour I am grateful. One day I will reward you, but for now, farewell. And the Scud ascended once more. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy, for retelling one of the many adventures of my foremother, Agnes Christina Pia of Clan Douglas. So, after meeting at the NSU Winter Session 2017, Betsy, Anna, and myself began a collaboration centering around a revisit, revisioning, and retelling of an event which marks the intersection between the fairy tale and historical reality. In our collaboration, we have built upon the history of the Principality of Lorenzburg, a pervasive, transmedia, large-scale, collaborative, conceptual art piece that manifests as a fairy tale micronation in a city section of the Swedish city of Karlstad. Because time is short, I will only give a brief background to the project. In essence, the Principality of Lorenzburg began manifesting in this reality in November 2014 when I misspelled the name of Lorenzburg, the city section where I grew up. Instead of the familiar spelling, it came out as Lorenzburg, which to my geographically uneducated ears sounded just like something that could be or should be an actual European principality. Said and done, since that fateful day, I have been the prince and main representative of the glorious and everlasting fairy tale micronation of Lorenzburg. Here are some lovely pictures from on-site. One of the main purposes of Lorenzburg is to serve as a platform for co-creating culture by inviting locals, artists, and others to bring their unique strand to the ever-growing tapestry of Lorenzburg. In our present collaboration, we have revisited an actual event that took place in 15th century Scotland. At this event, later called the Black Dinner, large parts of the powerful clan Douglas were invited to dine with the 10-year-old King James II of Scotland. However, as you have been told by the epic poems, at the end of the banquet, instead of their just desserts, they were served a cold-blooded murder that decimated the ranks. This event became the entry point for our collaborations. As a Prince of Lorenzburg, I had previously initiated a genealogical artistic project in order to refashion a suitably glorious past from my own family, the princely house from Fräähsen to Lorenzburg. Drawing on the extensive research of my paternal grandfather, I had managed to track my father's family line to 1501, which was the year that Harold, the first Prince of Lorenzburg, was born. Let's see. However, in the collaboration with Betsy and Anna, I had to go back even further in history, even though the historical sources were scarce. By means of the obscure methods of shamanistic archaeology, I managed to piece together a puzzle which took me back to 1239 and the birth of Laurens Boson Peacock, who was given land and titles at the Alsnö Ordinance of 1288. I don't know if it was just a coincidence, extreme luck, or perfectly normal fairy tale magic at work. But I was much surprised to discover that my great uncle, the knight Rune Olausson Peacock, had been a guest of Clan Douglas for some time and was one of the victims at the ill-famed Black Dinner of 1440. Also a guest in the banquet was a certain young Elizabeth, later called the Sturdy, of Clan Douglas. As so often happens in both history and story, Rune and Elizabeth had fallen in love and known each other. Rune died and Elizabeth lived, and in the spring of 1441, a beautiful baby girl was born. The girl named Agnes Christina Pia, the pious one, with the nickname Little P, grew up in Scotland. When she was older, she brought her father's heart back to Lorenzburg in order to bury it in his ancestral land. You can see that on the very end, Agnes Pia Christina on the boat there with her father's heart on the golden chain. Parts of these events are recorded on that embroidered tapestry, which Anna will tell you about shortly. After her arrival in Lorenzburg, Agnes Christina Pia and her cousin, Sir Frans Påfågel, the son of the murdered Sir Rune's younger brother, if this is confusing to you, it's to me as well, they fell in love and married. The grandson of Agnes Christina Pia and Sir Frans became the first Prince of Lorenzburg, Harold Princeps Lorenzburgensis, born in 1501. And this is the guy, my ancestor, where Photoshop and period paintings and speculative technology team up to make actual portraits of actual people. And his wife, Katarina Apikat, 20 years younger. As Prince of a new nation, Harold used his grandmother's nickname, Little P, Ärtan in Swedish, as the main symbol of the flag. A crimson oriflamme banner sprinkled with golden tiny crowns and a great golden key under a princely crown.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Every time I see the oriflamme being flown, I'm touched by this sign of a grandson's affection for his grandmother, and I feel intimately connected to great and peculiar family history, now shared with my distant relative Anna Frew and my colleague Betsy Lamborn. For myself, the collaboration with Anna and Betsy has meant exploring alternative modes of telling the Lorenzburg saga, epic poems and weaving parts of our personal family histories as a fabric to literally be embroidered with the colorful yarns of speculation, have allowed me to reactivate my own, or no, actually not anymore just my own project. As Anna and Betsy entered the scene, I got to see parts of the project that I hadn't seen before, and indeed couldn't have seen before. In the same vein, Lorenzburg becomes a mirror that allows for a revision of sides of myself that I couldn't have explored without inviting collaborator into the holiest of holy that is a loom upon which Lorenzburg is woven. Such partnerships ensure that my role as prince evolved from being the narrative tyrant or autocratic author of a made-up fantasy realm. Instead, myself and the land are renegotiated and reactivated in ways that open both the prince's heart and the doors to my realm wide. Now, please give it up for Anna Frew.
Has been a way to research and reactivate my half-Irish identity through my artistic practice. 2018 is an interesting time to be a half-British, half-Irish woman. British politics, Brexit, Britain leaving the EU, has made me question who I am more deeply than I have before. My father is from Northern Ireland. I moved to England 40 years ago. He moved to escape the terrorism and everyday violence he lived with during the Troubles in his hometown Belfast. In the 90s, there was a peace agreement in Northern Ireland and it became a safer place to live. Unfortunately, Brexit means this peace is again under threat. Now, I've lived the majority of my life in England, where my father met my English mother. My two cultures have rubbed along throughout my life with no real practical impact on big life decisions, but then came Brexit. Suddenly, who I am and who my Swedish husband is mattered. It changed where each of us has a right to live. So, for the first time, I claimed my Irish citizenship formally. This means I retained the rights as an EU citizen after Brexit, which for us meant an easy move to Stockholm, Sweden, where I live now. Whereas in the UK, my Swedish husband had his UK citizenship application rejected after 9 years of residence on a technicality relating only to students. This work with Freï and Betsy is a way for me to begin to unpick the practical realisation of my Irish identity and find connections to Sweden and Scandinavia through my creative practice. The bulk of the work is the depiction in a large embroidery of a story woven from my real and legendary family history combined with phrase. In the process of researching for this, in my family history, I uncovered some genuine connections to Sweden on the Douglas side. Some of my ancestors helped in a war in Sweden and then settled, and a distant branch of my family still live there to this day. There's even some manor house ruins I could visit. So the story contents is in part based upon my real Scottish ancestors in the Douglas clan. This is my father's mother's side. This is a well-documented, if outlandish, history. As mentioned earlier, my ancestors were brutally murdered whilst attending a feast after being served a black bull's head, a symbol of death. The other Douglas story woven is about my ancestor, the Black Douglas, which is how he was known to the English. He was tasked by Robert de Bruce, the King of Scotland at the time, with carrying the king's heart to Jerusalem in penance for the king's sins. The Black Douglas set off on this quest, but lost his own life fighting Muslims en route. This was the time of the Crusades. My ancestors' men cut out the Black Douglas's heart in turn and carried it back to Scotland along with the king's. You can still visit both hearts to this day. Now, the Irish history is much earlier and far more legendary. So, like 20% of Northern Ireland's population, my DNA shows I'm descended from Niall of the Nine Hostages, one of the Irish kings. Ireland had several at the time. Niall has a wide range of magical and fantastical stories about how he became king. The two woven into this tapestry include when he had sex with a hag in order to get water from a well, and when a druid set him and his half-brothers a task to decide the succession. The task was to go into a forge and make an item. Instead, the druid set fire to the forge and judged the brothers on what they carried out of the flames. So the different items are depicted on the edges of the tapestry, and Niall was chosen as he brought out an anvil, which meant he would be the anvil of the people, a kingly thing, according to the druid. The decision to work with embroidery, rather than my more typical cutting-edge technology format, was based on a few things. Firstly, this was still a new skill for me. I habitually take on a new media format in my artistic practice. Embracing the learning curve is part of my process. Of course, embroidery is hardly a new technology, but choosing to work in analogue meant I was able to make some long, slow work that I knew would function at the end of the project, unlike with a lot of new technology. Choosing the tapestry format was also partly as a nod to the long-standing history of women from noble houses depicting the important events that happened in their families. This style of tapestry is deliberately similar to the Bayeux tapestry. As a narrative object, it is designed to represent a family heirloom handed down by generations. So, whilst the materials are of course all modern, I wanted the illustrative style to reflect the work of the era it depicted. This style carried its own challenges as I had to unlearn drawing with perspective and a realistic scale. In the Bayeux tapestry, men can be the same height as buildings. They also don't worry when there's no space for text. They simply crowd it around the imagery with uneven spacing. Similarly, with people, realistic proportions are ignored to better suit what they wish to depict. Often, when I felt like my sketches looked wrong somehow, it was because I'd used too much realism. This kind of distortion also felt right for a fictional interweaving of family history. It's a useful, genuine historical convention to help make a more convincing fiction. The act of embroidering the work itself became a labour of painstaking love. The threads I used to make it are mostly inherited from my grandmother. This somewhat dictated the palette to her tastes. Aside the tartan, so the characters are wearing the Douglases' official tartan. Making the work has also brought me closer to my dad, and he's always had a long-standing interest in our ancestors. There's also been memories made whilst working on it. So, the man scared of the hag in the first scene, I made the day of the Manchester terrorist attack last year. Outside my window, a few metres from where I sat sewing, the brother of the terrorist was arrested by armed police. I stitched as I listened to the helicopters and sirens. Other memories are more serene, as I stitched severed heads while sitting in my parents' beautiful summer garden too, for example. Using my practice to interrogate my dual nationality is a much more personal approach than my usual storytelling content. There is a lot more of me in this work than any that's come before it. I imagine Agnes, the woman carrying her father's heart in a silver casket, as a representation of me. She is travelling to her new, as yet unfamiliar family and trying to forge a connection there.
I'm just going to say the very last thing, that Anna, Betsy and I explored Lorenzburg as a setting for shared past. Now you are invited, if you will, to bring your magic or even just your empty hands, cross the threshold and participate, if you will, in a chapter that's called The Future. We had scheduled a fantasy-esque role-playing game session where you, esteemed colleagues, were invited to participate in telling forth the story from where the tapestry ends. However, since my collaborators couldn't be in Riga with us, we will have to save that adventure for another time. But for now, if you will, please visit www.lorenzburg.org. Join the fairy tale, we're hiring. Thank you so much.